Okay, well, I just want to, I'm Gordon Lather. I'm the vice chair of the 4J School Board. Chair Myra Bassa was unable to make it due to a family event that she had to be away at. I just want to welcome everybody and thank you for being here this morning and get started so we can also let you go on time. And before we start anything else, I just wanted to go around and ask everyone to introduce themselves, and we'll start with you, Seth.
Hi everybody, my name is Seth Faflin, and I'm the president of MAPS. That's our local employee group for managers, administrators, professionals, and supervisors in 4J. It's wonderful to be here with y'all.
Justin Potts, I'm a school psychologist serving countywide G this year, but I've worked in 15 different schools across 4J. And I'm the EEA legislative rep, also co-chair of the Oregon Alliance for Suicide Prevention Schools Committee.
I'm Michelle Shu. Pronouns. I'm Sabrina Gordon. I'm an elementary teacher here in 4J and currently serving as president of Eugene Education Association.
And my name is Sheila Wagner, and I am the OSEA, Oregon School Employees Association Eugene Chapter 1 president. That's my time release job right now. My normal job with the district is working as a steady A. Also, I am on the executive board at state level of OSEA, and I am the Zoom director.
Good morning, my name is Roy Brzezowski, State Senator, District 4. The new District 4 will take in large portions of Eugene and Springfield will be new for me. The district I used to represent was the largest landmass west of the Cascades. It included very large portions of Douglas County and all of eastern Lane County, etc. So now consolidating into more of an urban district versus a more rural frontier urban district. My assignments, I will be chairing the Senate Judiciary Committee. I have chaired that committee since 2009 and will be serving on the Natural Resources Committee, as well as the new one for me will be Human Services. And then I have some other duties which I think I will be appointed to on Monday. We'll wait to see if that actually occurs.
Hi everyone, I'm Julie Fahey, she, her pronouns. I am the state representative for West Eugene, formerly Junction City, and now in the new district in Newport, Bonita. And I also pick up a little bit more of Eugene. So formerly my school districts were, I had a little bit of 4J, but mostly Bethel and Junction City. And now I have a little bit more of 4J. So happy to be here. I'm also the majority leader in the Oregon.
Hi, I'm Nancy Nathanson. I am in the House representing District 13, which is North Eugene. It includes like Hester Island Road, Northeast Neighbors, Harlow, Cal Young, and River Road and Santa Clara. So I have lots of 4J and some of Bethel. My assignments are the one that most people want to know about is I'm the chair of the House Committee on Revenue, which means taxes. how to raise money to fund the programs for state services. And in addition to that, I'm the House chair for the Joint Committee on Information Management and Technology. We just call it the Joint IT Committee. And that's where we're going to be talking about cyber security and maybe even cryptocurrency. And I'm on transportation now.
Good morning, my name is John Lively. I'm a state representative from Springfield, soon to be House District 7. I don't think the change is official until did it change January 1st? I don't know. It was House District 12, it's now 7. It's the same place. It's Springfield, essentially, is what I'm supposed to do. In this session, I will be chairing the House Committee on Higher Education, and the House Committee on Gambling Regulation, and I'll be serving on Economic Development and Small Business.
Morning, everyone. James Manning. I am Senator District 7, which is north and west Eugene, up to the beautiful community of Bonita. Representative AE is my House representative, so when I have a complaint, I will see you. And if it's on the other side, then I will go to Representative Nixon as well. So I am very fortunate to have two superstars North and the House in the same district with me. I currently serve on Senate Judiciary under the leadership of Senator Zonsky, been there for 5 years now. My current upcoming committee assignments includes Judiciary, the Rules Committee. I will be serving on the Human Resource Committee, and I chair the Senate Veterans Emergency Management Federal Relationship Committee. That's, I don't even know what that looks like yet, but it is a broad tent from what I'm used to. One of the things that I'm focusing on is universal health care. Been working on it for 6 years now, and we are getting to the point now where we're getting some movement forward. You're going to hear things about called the Bridge Plan. The Bridge Plan is a federal funded program with waivers that we are going to be working together to make sure we're kickstarting. And first of all, I want to thank everyone who voted for Measure 111, change the Oregon State Constitution requiring health care as a fundamental human rights, which is the foundation for my health care, universal health care bill. I'm also currently the Senate President Pro Tem, and I'm on the ballot again for a second term as Senate President Pro Tem. Thank you for having me this morning.
Thanks. I'm Alicia Hayes. I'm on the 4J School Board, and Nancy is my representative, and James is my senator, and I know where she shops, so go find her. Just look for her in the aisle. So this is my 16th year on the 4J School. Glad to be here with you.
I'm Melanie Mack. I'm a student representative for IHS.
I'm Parker Anderson, and I'm a student board representative from North Eugene.
I'm Tessa Mills. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a student board representative from Sheldon High School.
My name is Carmen Gonzalez-Vaya, and I'm a student board representative from Sheldon.
My name is Grant Gamble, and I'm a student board representative from Sheldon.
My name is Jasmine Amani. My pronouns are she, her, and I am South Eugene Student Board representative.
Can I introduce you? This is my board buddy, student rep. This is Ren Washington, and she's the student representative from Eugene Online Academy. So thank you. I'm so glad you guys are here. So I'm Judy Newman. I'm on the school board and on the school board legislative subcommittee. So.
I am Kirti Hasija Kaufman, also a Eugene 4J school board member and co-chair with Judy for the legislative committee.
And I'm Andy Dye. I'm the superintendent. I have been in Eugene now for 8 years, have 4 graduates and 2 current students in 4J schools, and I really appreciate everybody being here.
Hi, I'm Laura LaRourke. I'm on the 4J school board. I have 5 children, 4 of which have graduated from the schools here in 4J. And I'm happy to be here and to work to make change.
We have a couple people back there too.
Rob Hess, Chief of Staff, and appreciate everyone coming and helping us improve the rest of the schools here for our students here in Florida.
Good morning, I'm Jenna Kelly, and I am the Director of Communications and Intergovernmental Relations.
Thank you. So, ready, Gordon, should I just go next? Yeah,
Yes.
next on the agenda, great. So I just, first of all, have a couple housekeeping things. We do have microphones, and some of you have louder voices than others. So there's one over there between Julie and Nancy, and there's one up here that we can pass around. So if you have a quiet voice, please, we want to hear what everyone has to say. So if you please choose to use the mic or not, but we'd love to hear you. So I also wanted to let people know, obviously this is a public meeting because we're an elected body. So this was noticed and we are streaming it. We didn't necessarily invite everyone to come down, but people can be listening to this meeting, and we assume some people are. So just wanted to let you know that. So anyhow, welcome and Happy New Year to everyone, 2023. I hope everyone got some rest and are ready to start, but I really, really appreciate, as you all introduce yourselves as our legislators, I worked really closely with Julie. Your schedules are tight. The session is starting early this year, like a month early almost. And so we really appreciate you taking the time to come meet with us. We usually have a little more time, and it's going to be a very full session. I know that, and it's going to be maybe very long. So we wish you all the best, and we want to know whatever we can do to help you all this session. I just want to also thank, I don't know if Debbie's here or Jenna and our other staff. Yeah, Kirthi and I organized the meeting, but it would not have looked like this or been this well organized without them. So we really appreciate them, including the flowers, which were a really nice touch. So it's very nice. Oh, there you are back there. Thanks a lot. Yeah. So our school has a legislative subcommittee, at least as long as I've been on the board. I don't know how long the history is, but it's composed of the two of us. But what we do is really help guide the board through setting their priorities for the legislature each year. So we do a process, and so our priorities come from the full board, and we just are involved in helping to set those priorities. And then once we approve them, what we do is try to track things as closely as we can during the session with the help of our legislators, with the help of other groups in the state, so that we can either write letters, come testify, talk to our legislators, and weigh in on certain things that are important to us. So that's what basically we're about. And this year, the legislative committee, after we set our priorities, we decided it really made a lot of sense to go around and talk with our employee groups, because we often share a lot of priorities. So we met with EEA, with OSEA leadership, with MAPS, and we shared our priorities, and they shared theirs with us, so that hopefully today we'll identify, as our board members highlight the priorities we've chosen, which ones we share. And our plan during this session is to work together as much as we possibly can on those shared goals. So that's what we're doing. We're really happy this year to have our student reps with us as well. You're seated on the board, and you'll have a chance to share if you want today. And I'm sure sometimes the legislators have questions for you as well. So feel free to answer or not. Yeah. So the agenda is in front of you, the plan for the day. And we're going to try to stick to it, but we're going to start with the board members taking just a few minutes. Each one of us are going to share a couple of our priorities and possibly why we chose them. There'll be some time if the students want to add anything. And then we'll also highlight as we present the ones that are shared between our employee groups. And then we want to turn over the time to you all, so give you each some time to share what your priorities are and what your hopes are for this session. And then we will have Kirthi close us up with closing remarks and some questions. Sound like a plan? You got the agenda in front of you, and you also have, we're not going to be necessarily following the order of the priorities on the list, but you do have a copy of that as well that was handed to you this morning. So I get the first, you didn't get one?
I have it.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, great. We'll make sure you get an agenda.
I will share with her.
So anyhow, I'm going to start us off. Thank you. Thank you, Jenna. That'd be great. I'm going to start us off with the first couple priorities, and obviously the top of our list is funding. And probably this session there'll be a lot of time and energy spent on this. And as you could imagine, that is a priority we share with all three of our employee groups, and people will be working hard on this. So we know and we acknowledge the progress that Oregon has really been making the last couple of years towards improving school funding. Thank you to the Revenue Committee and all you legislators that worked so hard with getting the Student Investment Act that really helped. And so our funding is moving in the right direction. But as you know, we have a ways to go. So the only thing I'm going to talk a little bit about funding is our current understanding is that, we're looking both at our state school fund and at the Student Investment Act funding. And what we know is that, when you look at roll-ups for budgets, our understanding is that the education budget was given a 2.4 cost CSL, roll-up percentage, and that several of the other state budgets, like the Department of Human Services and higher education, we know got more in the 8 to 9%, which is probably reflecting more reality. Now, again, this was shared with me. You all might know more about it, but there is a concern that the numbers we're hearing will result, if it's not adequate roll-up, obviously, in some reduced services. So it's just something we want to pay attention to, work closely with you. We'd like to be a partner in providing any information and examples that would help during this session on that, because honestly, we know how supportive you all are of K-12 and public education. And again, we can't thank you enough. So that's all I'm going to say today about funding. We're going to try to keep our comments brief. But I get the next one, which is no great surprise to many of you, and that's that our board actually identified as a priority, it wasn't just me talking this way, as a high priority is funding high quality universal preschool and early learning programs. And we as a board really recognize how important these investments are to our own K-12 students. And we know how important brain development is, family engagement, and all those supports that we provide to kids and families early on. So I think our big message is, it's not either or. We look at our education system really as a cradle to career system, which I know so our previous governor and current, our governors have really had that view, because if we don't start early and keep at it, we're not going to be giving opportunity to our students who will be our future citizens very well. So we will be tracking those bills as well and weighing in as needed. So I think Michelle is next to get to talk about some priorities.
Yes. I'll be talking today about mental health and belonging. I'm not an expert like Judy, so I'll be reading. I'm learning as I go along, and I don't have a loud voice. Our legislative priorities, district priorities, school priorities, and societal priorities should center the health and well-being of those we serve. Attention placed on people, how well or not they are, and whether they're being cared for, is my personal priority. We have indications that a swath of our students and staff do not feel cared for or safe in every aspect. One of the aspects that I'm highlighting today is mental health. There's a need for state-based resources to provide times when students and staff can feel cared for, to be reeled in when feeling untethered. Levels of anxiety, depression, and dysregulation, both self-diagnosed as well as medically diagnosed, are unprecedented. What would the world look like where everyone felt safe and cared for? Many issues require attention. Marginalized students and staff do not have a sense of safety and belonging. The community requires lessons in equity, communication, and relationships. We need to teach students how to listen by modeling that practice ourselves. We need a community of care. 4J is taking measures to create more time for students in new high school schedules. Administration is beginning the process of answering the urgent request for mental health services, looking to the Corvallis School District and the measures they have taken to integrate mental health services into schools. Health centers are needed at all of our high schools as a matter of health equity to address both physical and mental well-being. Both are required for learning. Only 2 out of our 4 high schools currently have a school-based health center. We look to our legislators for support and relief. Thank you for the ways in which you've prioritized education and well-being in the past. And we look forward to your continued advocacy. Thank you.
Oh, it's my turn now. Okay, I'm ready to go. So, I think you asked Judy how long has this been going on. I think this is my 16th year, and some of you look really familiar. I think Nancy and Floyd, you were there, and Don, maybe, you were pretty close to Senator, I remember when you and Judy started. So, thank you for coming out and sharing your time with us. I think because I've had the longest tenure on the board, I get the oldie but goodie. You've heard this, I think, every single year. I was gonna put it in song, but I've been encouraged not to. I was also gonna do it as Colbert does with Meanwhile. I was also encouraged not to. I'm sure that all existing and new mandates include funding for implementation. I like to say, when we set new standards, that is also the truth, because y'all saw Baker Mayfield, right? He joins the team, he throws the touchdown. That isn't how it works, and you know this in education. We need to give our instructors, our professionals, time to look at the curriculum, develop the curriculum, make it their own. So it's really hard when we kind of just say, here you go, there's no money, oh, and there's no time. So we have to really be thoughtful about that. Also, I say, I'm going to share this, and you'll be, didn't you just tell me no unfunded mandates? But it's where you got to get creative. You have to get creative. Support environmental and climate change initiatives in education and education outcomes. And that can be in ways like related to school facilities, what we put forward in building our school facilities. We've been talking about buses here and the new purchase of buses, operational practices, and as well, how do we develop curriculum for our students that also include that piece. And I will say the loudest voice of climate change that I've heard on this board have come from our student reps. And I'm sure this year we will hear the same thing. They are the things that I have seen as we do this work, right? This initiative and these issues. How do I do? Usually I go over, so. Now I get to pass it on to Judy, who will pass it on to
Laurel, I think you're.
Is it me?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm awake. Hi. So I'm talking about workforce, recruiting and retaining a diverse and qualified workforce. A little thing I wrote, I said, retention doesn't start with hiring. It starts with our government being willing to implement protective and supportive laws and policy. Affirmative action is known to have been a great help for one demographic, which is white women. Unfortunately, in Oregon, we ignore the needs of our marginalized workforce. We hire people and then that's it. And what we know about what happens inside of workplaces is that you can do as much training as you want until you're blue. You can go to as many equity trainings that you want. It will not make a difference. What makes a difference is having firm policies and procedures that the leadership is willing to follow. And that means having laws and policies that support that. And so anything you can do when you hear, and when I talk about marginalized people, I usually rest with Black and Indigenous because we have the hardest time in Oregon. And so I say, if you hear a Black or Indigenous person talking and it makes you go, ugh, that is the inherent bias that we live in. That's the soup we all dwell in. That's what we know. But if you feel that, that means that's also a chance to go, I need to know more and I need to understand this better and to dig in, because with that, you will learn a lot more. And instead of the fear of change, it will be the beauty of change. So that is my part about workforce. Also, everybody needs to get paid more, I'm sure, including you guys. My passion here, I'm a mom of 5, 3 of them with IEPs. they have struggled in the school system. They weren't really seen, they definitely weren't valued. They just were there. And I had to be that mom to say, this kid matters, you're gonna have to teach him. I have a lot of boys. I have one girl, a lot of boys. I came here, one of my biggest passions is for CTE. I don't just want a gesture towards CTE. I want massive funding for CTE, and CTE is career and technical education. And I want the thought to be outside of the box. I want it to be our SPED students having a chance to work as educational assistants, because one of the biggest problems with our younger students is nobody kind of understands what they're going through when they're young. So wouldn't that be a great connection that we actually could hire our people that used to be our students and have a CTE program that prepares them to have a living wage job? And my work I used to do when I worked for Lane County, I know we are making our own homeless population in Oregon. And I know one place it starts is in schools. And my thing I said to get on this board was skills before bills. I mean, before you are grown up and you get this protective time that people like you fought for our kids to have until they're 18, they get to be protected. And if we could give them skills to get out of school with a job that gives them a living wage, that is possible. So that's a dual diploma program. It will take money and it will take a little bit of time, but there are a lot of people that are very passionate about this. And I think we can make our own CTE high school in Eugene and be a leader in this in Oregon to show the numbers for homelessness will absolutely go down, because once you bring hope to back, people stop giving up. So I took too much time, but I get excited.
Great.
Thank you.
Perfect. And I get to follow that lovely speech with something that's going to sound very self-serving, and I want to say that it's not. I get a lovely speech about compensation for board members on local school boards. It's something difficult to talk about when I am serving on a school board, but I am going to be very straight about it, which is to a certain extent, Oregon's citizen volunteer legislator purpose has been, to a certain extent, keeping citizen volunteers from participating and having a voice in local governing bodies due to a lack of compensation. And we need to have people who have the resources and compensation to be able to participate in the communities in which they are serving and being governed by. And that's the basis of the matter. So allowing compensation for school board members in ways of stipends, in terms of pay for childcare, IT, transportation, communications, any ways that they'll be able to come in and participate in times that may take place, like where people are doing multiple jobs, shift work, just aren't able to participate. Usually these communities are coming from places that are already marginalized or overlooked, aren't able to have a voice for many other reasons in the system. We really need to open it up. It is a matter of equity. We talk about that in our school systems, but I think we overlook that as an education system across our community members on there, and we need to make that a priority for us. I think it's going to be a matter of looking at lifting and eliminating particular sections of issues that we have already there. In addition to that, I know OSB is probably going to be talking about this, and we will probably be supporting legislation around training for school board members. Michelle and I started just within this past year, and I can speak from experience that we came in a very interesting time where we were putting in likely 20 to 50 hours a week outside in our volunteer positions here, both with jobs on there, and asked to provide immediately oversight on things like transportation, funding, budgets, curriculum, superintendent hires, with very little training, very little orientation, and doing it with legislative compliance, with very little orientation. I can tell you it was a very, very high learning curve. And Alicia, thank you, because 16 years of the board, she's become our like what happened on there. So I greatly appreciate that and the help from all of our local board members on those. The other third piece of that is an annual self-assessment. I do believe that for us to be effective at our jobs in governing, we also need to be looking at ourselves in evaluation. What are we doing right? What are we doing for a community? How are we taking a look at what we've done over the year? Are we achieving our goals? And having something that comes with legislation that just looks to see how we are actually achieving those over a course of a year would be extremely helpful. And anything we can do to help push those kinds of pieces across, I think will be really open up our communities and voices across the state and actually governing our local school systems. So that's my piece on that. Gordon?
Great, thanks. I want to talk about the last two things, which is trying to have less standardized testing and spend less time on standardized testing, and then something related to that. And I'm sure this is something you've heard about from many people for many years, and for us too. It's something the board has talked about, but the truth is it's primarily something that's solvable at the state level, whether through legislation or through the Department of Education administratively, but mostly not in our hands as the board. The first concern is just the days of learning loss. The truth is we don't know exactly how many days are spent, not taking the tests we know, but preparing for tests. We don't know. We're looking at trying to do a survey of teachers to find out the answer to that question. But anecdotally, we hear some teachers saying up to 10 days a year are spent preparing for and administering standardized tests, which often are testing kids not on what they're actually learning the rest of the year in their classes, which is part of why there's so much time preparing, because what you regularly teach has not prepared them because it's testing about a different subject. So we're in the position of kind of killing ourselves to make up for a single snow day when we have too many snow days, and meanwhile we're giving away up to 10 days a year of instruction on things that is not core to what we really want to be engaging students in. It has some other problems as well, which is the overwhelming focus on just reading and math over the time, and this is nationally, has crowded out art, drama, even hands-on lab science. Like everything else gets short shrift in terms of what we're able to give kids. And the tests, for the most part, a lot of the tests are not actually useful to teachers being able to figure out how I should change the curriculum. In particular, the state mandated Smarter Balance test, teachers don't get the results of those tests until the following year. So it doesn't let you know, oh, maybe I should do something else with this student who's in front of me now. So I know that Senator Frederick has been sponsoring legislation around this, and that the State Department of Education is looking at applying for a federal waiver because some of that is in the hands of the federal government about what the mandate is for Oregon. And whether it's looking at things like doing testing a sampling of students instead of 100% of students, or whether some tests could be done every other year, or there could be less preparation. We don't have an exact proposal, but we're interested in being able to minimize the role the testing plays. And then somewhat related to that is we want to expand the definition of instructional minutes. And I know this is like a very in the weeds thing, but on the one hand, we spend a lot of time on testing that we don't want to. And then there are some other things like, one of the possibilities we're looking at now is having an individual assessment of every kindergartner. There could be a one-on-one meeting between the teacher and the kindergartner and their parent at the beginning of the year to try to be clear about what the needs are of each individual kid. Right now, that doesn't count as instructional minutes. So if we want to do it within the budget without being able to pay for extra time, something else needs to be cut. And so there are things like that, student affinity group meetings as well. And I believe there's going to be a bill coming forward from that, supported by the Oregon Education Association. And I would say for those who want to know more, we've been lucky to get educated on this by the EEA and OSEA, who are here after the meeting for anybody who wants to talk with them. But those two related things are things that we're hoping to see some progress on this year. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to just open it up to any students. I know you had a chance to think about it. You may or may not have something you want to add or talk about. Did anyone? You did great. Thanks.
I'd like to potentially add on to the importance of what Laurel mentioned about the CTE programs in the schools, because at least over at North, it feels like there is a lot of times a lot of focus on the IB courses or a lot of the sports programs that we offer, which are really great, amazing things that we have. But there's a lot of times a lack of focus from anyone except the CTE instructors that we have at the school on those programs. And we're really lucky to have some amazing CTE instructors who really like push to make that known and get that out there. But I know a lot of people who haven't known about those courses, and then they get put in there and they come out and they're like, I love that. I learned so much. This is like something I might want to pursue as a career. This really helps me. And it feels like it'd be really great if those could be made wider known or given more access to, or even just having more of them, so that students can find those careers they might want to pursue.
Excellent, thank you.
Thanks.
I would like to emphasize the importance of making sure our students and staff have proper mental health programs and supports. We're still feeling the effects that COVID-19 had within our school's population, and making sure that all students and staff are supported and giving the resources they need to continue to thrive within our school district is a necessary need.
I just feel like some of my priorities are probably just expanding the education, probably getting more CTE programs, and just expanding more AP classes and IB classes, and just making them more known and being talked about, because a lot of students don't know what they're about. They don't get enough information about what exactly these courses will offer and how it'll potentially benefit them. And I also feel like mental health is also important. I think it'd be good to have a counselor in every school that talks about mental health, because I feel like that's something that our school's lacking, and we're not really seeing much of these supports in our schools. And I think another important part would probably just be like expanding like affinity groups and making them more known.
I have something to say too about like the mental health resources. I think specifically at my school, I've been seeing like a growth of resources, but the communication about them to students isn't there, so students don't know that the resources are at my school. And I'd also like to add, at my school we have like a BIPOC gathering, and I think more support for BIPOC students specifically would be super helpful, and it's definitely really fundamental. You know, school is an environment that you have to be in for a really long time, and being able to provide that support for BIPOC students is so important. So, thank you.
Anything else? Anyone else want to speak or have anything else on your mind? Thank you. Thanks a lot. Okay, so I guess we've gotten to speak first. So we would like to turn over the time to you all to share what your priorities are, what your hopes are for this session. And so I don't know who wants to go first. Nancy, great.
Thank you. Since I have to leave just a little bit early, I'm headed to Salem this morning. I actually have a question for you and also a response to something that Gordon brought up. The question is, are you all using the National Career Readiness Certificate so that students can show the job skills that they've attained during their years of learning? This is something I've wondered about a lot.
We're looking at the superintendent. We haven't.
We have not systematically implemented programs that result in that certificate attainment. We are in the process of really aligning all of our CTE programs to industry standards. And that could be a challenge because industry partners change and industry moves much faster than we do. So the answer is somewhat yes, and in the near future.
Well, I have been asking about this for many years because, like you, for many years, ever since the first year I ran for state legislature, which is 2006, I've been talking about we're failing a large number of students and their families because of overemphasis on a four-year college degree. So it's been many years, and I've asked about this a couple of times gently about the career readiness certificate. Most often people say, oh, well, we offer a GED for people who didn't finish high school. I said, no, that's not what I'm talking about. And we changed the lingo from voc ed to CTE. That's great. I'm really glad about that. But I do hope that you explore whether this certificate might be appropriate for some of the students who are interested in being able to demonstrate skills and go out in the world of work immediately following high school.
So I'm gonna sound old and say, I remember when we had the folks that received those, come to the board meeting, so I know we've done it in the past with workforce, and it was, you know, so I know it's been there.
Thank you, Alicia. The other thing I wanted to mention is on the subject of testing. I agree there's too much testing, and it may be that some of you, just because of this happened in the past, a couple of years ago, but I was able to pass a bill to start reining in testing. It doesn't start with saying, okay, you have to reduce the number of tests. That's how I wanted to start. I just wanted to start big and strong and fast. But that is not really the way you ought to do things. So the first thing we do is we start with a study, a one-time study. It's not a mandate that school districts have to start reporting every year. Because I also know you send over 80, I think you have over 80 reports that you have to do every year to the state. And that sounds like way too much. I was not gonna add on to that burden. But there will be a one-time survey of all school districts of what tests they are doing that are not the state mandated tests. Because school districts all across the state have been choosing to do a bunch of other tests. And why are those being done? And some of them cost a lot of money, and they do take a lot of time away from the classroom. And it's a burden on all the school staff as well. So there was a bill passed, it was House Bill 4124, and I want to thank, there are specifically some people in the room who helped me with this initiative. So there will be some results from that starting next year. Great. And from that, people can then understand, make better educated decisions on, whoa, this really is too much. We really shouldn't be doing that.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I'll go next. You know, I'm happy to talk about policy and sort of our policy priorities in the session. But, you know, I don't think I'll say anything that will be surprising to all of you. You know, we're going to focus on housing, making sure we can build more housing to meet the need in Oregon, and keep people housed, working with local governments and service providers to address homelessness, mental and behavioral health care, which just about everyone has mentioned, you know, climate and creating strong schools and that sort of cradle to career pipeline. So happy to talk about any of those in more detail if that's interesting to you, or if you have questions. I want to make a broader point about the session, and that is that we're in a bit of a rebuilding and regrouping period in the legislature, I would say. Much like you all, for the last few years, we've had just crisis to crisis to crisis to crisis. And so, you know, you're talking about compensation for board members, right? Like in the legislature, we had 5 special sessions in the pandemic. It was nonstop crisis and emergency. And so there's a little bit of regrouping coming out of that. And there's also, we obviously have a new governor, and we've had substantial turnover in the legislature. So while there's a lot of stability up here for those of us locally, in the House, we have 21 of 60 members are brand new, plus an additional, I don't even know, 10 or 15 that are from the last, you know, came in during the pandemic. So 2/3 of our House have never even had an in-person session. So we have a brand new, on the House side, we have a brand new education policy chair. So I'm putting that out there as context from the standpoint of, you know, we're doing our own rebuilding and regrouping, and we have new leadership all across the board. So new speaker and majority leader myself in the House for the last, a year ago. There'll be a new Senate president this year, and there's a new Senate majority leader. And the Republican leaders are relatively new in the last year and a half. So huge turnover coming out of the pandemic. Just want to set that stage. And one of the reasons why that's important, I think, is that, you know, we always, best practice in policymaking is to rely on our community organizations, or school districts, or teachers unions, or employee groups to help inform our policy solutions.
And this year in particular, because of the newness of the legislature, I think we will rely on you all even more. So the specifics of, what does it look like for you? What is most helpful from the legislature on expanding and supporting mental health and social emotional supports for students and staff? That is a goal. What do the solutions look like for that goal that the legislature can help support? I don't want to say we're sort of advocating responsibility, that's not true at all. We have folks that are working on it, but just acknowledging the environment that we're in. And then I would say the other point I would like to make is, and there are a couple of these bullet points that I think seem more like goals than legislative solutions, and they're goals that we share, but we'll need some partnership to figure out what does that look like at the legislative level. And the last point I'll make is around the dynamic and the tension between local control and the state. So I see, probably don't need to get into that for most of you, but you feel it from one side, we feel it from the other, and try to be mindful of not too many mandates, but we don't want to get that right. I think, I look at some of these bullet points around pay for workforce, or the idea of more health centers at the high schools, and I think, well, what does that look like at the legislative level, especially the pay issue, right? To me, that's just ensuring that the funding levels are sufficient enough so the districts can do it. Otherwise, we're talking about here's a pot of money specifically for you to do this, and then that reduces your flexibility. So there's a tension. If we want to ensure, same thing with the health centers. If we want to ensure all 4 high schools get health centers, we can do a line item allocation that says build a health center. Is that what you want? So, but that, from our point of view, that's what gets the thing done, that accomplishes the thing, rather than giving the flexibility at the local level to make that decision. So I think there's that tension there that I want to acknowledge around how do we ensure these, as a legislature, how do we ensure these outcomes while also maintaining respect and local control and flexibility for you all. And I'm happy to talk housing all day long if people want to ask me questions.
Okay, thank you. Since the representatives, one of the senators, I'll complete that cycle.
It starts in the house.
So I've served for a decade, and much of what we're talking about today, we've been talking about for a decade, and we've made incremental improvements. And so one of the things I know clearly is there is no instant change and it's going to be better, but we've got to keep hopefully making those incremental improvements. And understand from an individual legislator, so I only serve on certain committees. I've never served on Ways and Means. So while I have strong opinions about Ways and Means and what they should, I don't serve on those committees. And so at the end of the day, when I get to vote is after all the conversations that I share opinions along with. So a couple of things about my assignment this year. So the House has, in recent time, hasn't had a higher education committee. The education committee has dealt with higher education and K through 12. And as you know, as Judy knows, we've had an early learning committee, so it's a pretty different lineup this particular time. And so in the higher education time is higher education and workforce. So when we're talking about workforce, there's a lot of issues that dovetail between community colleges, 4-year universities, and so on that we're going to be working on the legislature. Early learning now is in human services, so we're going to have to make sure how that's tied together. So Senator Dembro, who has led these efforts in the Senate for some time, and I have already been meeting and talking about with the staff, along with Representative Neron, who's going to be the chair of the Education Committee in the House. So one of the things we're trying to do is wherever we need legislation and things that are working, that there's a continuity of those that goes all the way through from early learning through that, even though we have separate committees working on it. I feel pretty strong that that's the way we need to deal with this. I want to say one thing about gambling. You say, so why are we worried about gambling or talking about it? This state, and you know, is very dependent upon the lottery. And we've not really reviewed the lottery since it was implemented, how many, 30 years ago. And it's not just the lottery, it's the tribes, the casinos, but there's a whole lot of issues around who's being impacted negatively by all the gambling. Are we taking care of those people? Are we addressing what the issues are? And then there's the issue of how far do we drive revenue from these sources. gambling versus doing other things. Because there's those that are arguing we have a whole range of additional revenues we could do tomorrow if we did a bunch of different things, and particularly the lottery. But that's not necessarily the only outcome we need to worry about. So that's part of why we have this committee and trying to understand that. I'll continue even though I don't serve directly. I'm a true believer about 0 through, we aren't doing enough. We haven't done enough. We need to do more. You know, childcare is a huge issue. So one of the things that we're talking about on higher education on the workforce side is what more can we do to help provide the training and the support we need for people to work in childcare. That cuts across many different boundaries in that. And it's not just in education, it's in jobs. People can't go back to work or work if they don't have both adequate and affordable childcare. So we're continuing to work on those things. And I'm a believer of local control. So I came from being a mayor and a city council member. And so I spent a lot of time in the legislature trying to protect and not do mandates, but once in a while I vote for an unfunded mandate. It just seems like they convince me, or I convince myself. But so I'm spending quite a bit of time with my community and the counties in that, working on things to try to protect the ability for local elected officials to make those decisions that your communities think you should make in that versus us making those decisions in the legislature. When I go back though, remember I only serve on certain committees, policy committees. So directly I only have those are the committees that have the most influence over, but have the ability to do influence or talk with. And I want to credit Representative Fahey and Speaker Mayfield. So one of the things I'm looking forward to, I just think in spite of the challenges we're going to have with sending new members, I think the atmosphere in the legislation, particularly the House, is going to be different than what we've had for quite a few years. And as one legislator, I'm looking forward to that. Less rancor, more working together. Doesn't mean we're going to agree on everything, but the temperature down in there, so I think all of us can feel better about the outcomes. And I appreciate that that's what leadership's about, and I think we have the majority leader and speaker people who are going to help us get there.
Awesome.
So I'll go next and leave it to our senator, because I honestly need to put a vote on it. Thank you again, especially students listening to you is really important to me. Since I have been in an elected office, I found is the most enjoyment I get is when I go out to schools and I speak to the students. Specifically, I visit a lot of schools for 3rd, 4th graders. So if you recall your time as a 3rd, 4th grader, you were always open. You said what was on your mind, and you never bite your tongue because you spoke as to what you felt. I want to encourage you to continue on in that same thing. Be honest with yourself, be open with yourself, and stand firm to your convictions, because where you're going to be in your role in leadership right now will transform into something greater over time if you lead with your heart and your convictions. I heard a lot here today, and I agree that there are multiple issues before us. You're talking about compensation for volunteer board members. I've always said that here in Eugene, we have some of the most passionate people here, and people will volunteer, they would step up and they would do the hard work. And then when paid staff goes home, those volunteers are still there working, and they're giving out of their own pockets and their own resources. I think that there's room for some kind of compensation for that. I served 6 years on Eugene Police Commission, and I worked weekends and I worked nights, and I met with all kinds of neighborhoods. And this is when there was a transformational moment with EPD. I was on there drafting the first in Oregon's law, a body worn camera. Here, it started here in Eugene, and it was because of volunteers. But I had to pay for my own parking. I had to pay everywhere I went. When paid staff was at home, I'm still out meeting with people, cane-related issues and stuff, because it was not about me. It was about our community. So I understand volunteerism. And I talked to city leaders and said, you need to be more mindful and careful about how you treat your volunteers, because without them, nothing is going to work. In the case of school board members, you are creating policies and practices that impact and affect all of the students and families in the district. That says a lot. That also says that there is room for some type of compensation. In the Oregon State Legislature, we found out when we were trying to do a legislative pay equity, and it failed, we lost a lot of talented people, lawyers that were on there, medical professionals, because they could no longer afford to do the work. It takes a lot out of you. There's a lot of travel. There's no things nowadays as a part-time legislature. Everyone up here, I guarantee you, work all the time, even on weekends, you're getting emails and everything else. So I do get that. The CTE part, I have been a supporter of that for a long time. And I've talked to Bethel superintendent. By the way, I'm on the Bethel School District Budget Committee and Long Range Planning Committee. I've been on there for 8 years. They won't let me get off of it as a volunteer. You know, once you volunteer and you get in, you're next. Nobody's gonna say, well, I'll do it next. You know, so I really appreciate the work you're doing. But I asked specifically about the flow of the cat tax. Representative Nixon did a marvelous thing spearheading the cat tax. First time in what, 35 years that Oregon has ever did anything like that. But all the stars were perfectly aligned and is going through it. And I want to know if you are getting the money. It does no good for us to pass financial budgeting legislation and I can't see any results. I don't know if you're getting them. And if you are getting them, are they being applied as to it was intended to be? So I'm still waiting for more issues and more concerns on that. Workforce. When we're talking about workforce, I met with the new director of Peace Health. And I was explaining to them in Bethel, California High School, I set up a program there where the students annually go to Peace Health and they get a chance to do a tour of that facility to understand that there are more jobs other than doctors and nurses. You got X-ray techs, you got dietitians, you got therapists. That's a whole array. And I made a commitment and connect them where they take those students through. And if those students desire to do an internship, they are granted an internship during the summertime. I'm trying to expand that, so Superintendent, I will be speaking with you and the board members. I know Churchill has a program where they're doing something like that. So I can go on and on. We have people that's got to go. I'll stop now, but I'll certainly be available to talk with you more about some of these issues. Testing, 2 minutes.
Thanks.
Well, thank you again for hosting us. You might ask, well, why is she going last? Well, I'm the old guy. I will be the senior ranking member of the Senate starting this next year. I will be starting, I believe, my 26th year of service as a legislator, 7 years in the House and now in the Senate. I also have a day job, as we've heard. Everyone wants to try to bring more diversity into our systems, as at the school boards, as well as in the legislature. We had a very active, and you're going to see another extremely active attempt. And I hope that we will have an up or down vote on legislative pay, because I see for the years that I've been there, how many people have come and not been able to stay. And what we want is more diversity of those who are making decisions. You look at me, my age, and my colleagues, we need younger people, not saying Julie's old, but we need younger people because of the focus and stuff so dynamic occurring that we just are not in touch with. And so we hope that we'll be successful so we can set a framework where people can actually focus and stay with that profession if that's what they choose to do, and the voters continue to elect them. That's the check and balance we have here. The other part that we are dealing with, and I think we've seen this unfortunately on national TV, national level, bipartisanship. I have seen in my time this change and shift. When I first came in, having 5 mentors, 3 Democrats, 2 Republicans, and having those 2 Republicans behind the Democrat that would stop everything they were doing when I walked into their door to help me understand how to do stuff. And one of them gave me the impression, gave me that foresight. When you come into that building, you leave your partisan stripes at the door, you come in and work together with the other 89 members, do the best you can, represent your constituents, but look at the state as a whole. I have taken some opportunities to try to rebuild these relationships, to get people out of the building, just to meet each other, learn about yourselves, your families, and that starts breaking down those barriers that unfortunately we've seen, and I will have to say in Oregon, for the last 6 to 8 years, it just seems to be going in the wrong direction. So hopefully, as John has said, as James said, we will be able to start forging new relationships and seeing a different attitude of the people that are coming in to serve, to work united, not divided. As most of you know, we work what we call the committee process, and so I'll go over a couple of the things that will be happening in the judiciary, because these are some of the stuff that's actually made the news, and you'll see that all of the various components. I cannot be in each and every committee that we have. I have to rely on my colleagues. So, and my colleagues rely on me in the areas that I serve. So as the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, this year we will be taking on the need to ensure public defense services. Our state currently, we have individuals that are been charged with crimes. My day job, I'm a prosecutor. I've been a prosecutor in the state for 34 years. It really disturbs me to know that we have people who are being charged with crimes by the state or at the local level, and specifically at the state, that do not have attorneys representing them, that they are eligible to have an attorney, but we just don't have the attorneys. And of that, the last count I heard, it was 30 to 40 individuals who were actually in custody, meaning they're incarcerated and they have no attorney. We cannot do that in Oregon. We have to make a change, and my committee will be working with the House committees that will be trying to take care of this on the policy side and also on the funding side. Measure 114, something that we just had the voters pass, dealing with more gun safety regulations. It is now tied up in the courts, both in the federal court and the state court. But my committee has been assigned this task to start looking at Measure 114. More than likely what you will see, I hope, is something that we in the legislature can agree to in the intent of what the voters wanted, and bring something together that will be a package that we can all move forward with. The other area that just came out this last week, there was a decision that the U.S. Supreme Court made about 4 years ago on Ramos. The Ramos decision basically told Oregon and the state of Louisiana that you cannot convict people on less than a unanimous jury verdict. What they didn't answer at the U.S. Supreme Court was whether or not that should be applied retroactively, meaning for those who've already been convicted. And we just had the state Supreme Court come down and say, yes, it is retroactive. Yes, it goes back, and it has into perpetuity. So individuals who have completely been served their sentence, have completely been off of whatever probation, parole, when they went to prison, they also will be able to challenge their conviction because they were unconstitutionally convicted. And so we are going to be dealing with a lot of different issues here, because you have people who are now, like I say, completed their sentence. The only thing is that they committed a crime that required them to go like on the sex registry. And many of those individuals are probably going to want to revisit that because of the impact it has had on their lives. So we will have our hands full on that. The last one that I'll mention to you is Measure 110. This is something that was passed a couple of years ago by voters. This is another citizen initiative. This basically took a low level of controlled substances, decriminalized them, and with the sense that what the voters wanted and what I believe is shifting away from using prisons and jails to deal with addiction and going to the medical model Unfortunately, like with anything that's passed by either the voters or the legislature, you need to see what you put forward, is it working? And right now it's not. So we will in fact make some modifications to that. And again, trying to keep the will of the voters on our primary concern and moving forward and to try to implement that better than it has been. Fortunately, money that is coming out of the tax systems that are going into these programs are now being dispersed into the communities. And I expect in the next year, we'll see a different horizon than we see right now. The last thing I want to leave with is for the students. One, thank you very, very much for doing your service and serving on this board here. I hope that each and every one of you will take the time and come up and see us in the legislature. This is an opportunity that if you would like to be an intern for any one of our offices, we will be more than glad and welcome you, embrace you, because we know that this is an opportunity for you to see how your government works. And we hope with your initiative to be part of the board today, that in the future, you'll look at serving in the legislature. I just hope that we can make the boards affordable and you can actually focus and be there. But please contact any of us on the House side or the Senate side. And we can give you an opportunity to work not only within our office for a day, be on the floor, and I believe both of the chambers will still have the student intern programs. So you can actually serve as a page, I guess is what we call them today, as someone that actually works on the floor with us for that day. So please don't be scared. Please just reach out to any of us, and we'd love to have you and your friends and your colleagues. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, awesome.
Thank you all for coming. And before I start my wrap up, and I'll be brief, I wanted to acknowledge Senator Manning. I have a very vocal fourth grader and a very vocal first grader, and I agree with you entirely. They know exactly who they are and what they want, and I'm hoping to encourage that. And also, Senator Prudensky, I was informed when I was appointed that I'm also no longer a young person, so I'm very happy to have the student representatives as well too. So really appreciate your time to be here today too. On a, I'm sure you're really missing first period right now on those. I'm not going to regurgitate everything we heard today. I know we've covered so many different priorities across programming, curriculum, support services, implementation, most of all funding. So many of these are shared with our employee associations, especially the funding, especially the mental health support services. Those have been there. Things around CTE, those have been high priorities for us for many, many years together. So anything that we've been doing together, we're really hoping to be able to have a voice at the state level, not just in our local communities, to be able to push those policies forward. We've made a deliberate choice, I think, this year as a board to be working in collaboration and partnership with our employee associations and the administration to be able to become a voice for our marginalized communities, for our communities that don't have a say, and for just looking at ways that we can drive an education system that allows students to thrive emotionally, socially, creatively, and intellectually. Julie, I can always count on you for a task list and a spreadsheet, so I really appreciate the direct actions you've given us. That was going to be a question that I had, which is how do we work directly with your offices and able to be able to support legislation and policy that is moving forward. So I really appreciate the specifics that you've given us on examples, what types of solutions, how do we look at specific things that are going to work for a community. There were two things I wanted to address here. One, the attention you mentioned on local and the state control piece of it. And I think that covers the attention that we have in education all that time too, which is outputs versus outcomes, right? Like you can build 400 schools, but if children aren't learning in it, have you really achieved an outcome? And that addresses the issue of sustainability. And I think that addresses directly what you had mentioned, which is if we build one health center, is that actually doing or achieving the outcomes that we wish to achieve for our community? And is that going to be the solution we wish to look for? Are we looking for something greater that is going to have higher levels of sustainability moving in the future? And I think those are all questions that we're going to have to answer together as we move forward in pushing legislation and advocating for that. I know those are all questions that are really hard, especially when we're coming out of a crisis situation and there's some very dire emergency level needs immediately. I also know that priorities are going to have to be reprioritized based on whatever the session is gonna look like, whatever we get informed on, and what our community and our climate is gonna look like for this coming year. One thing I think that we as a community need to be better at with our legislators is explaining to a certain extent how education outcomes have a direct impact on every other outcome. One thing that came out of the OSBA conference I just attended was a pollster talking about how low public education was in the last gubernatorial election as a priority for our public. And it was scary to me. And the top things on health, safety, homelessness, these key pieces of it. And to me, the direct correlation between a CTE, the skills, mental health, early childhood, on things like economic, social, homelessness, safety, all of those are direct correlations from an education impact. And I think we do a somewhat poor job of explaining those. So anything that we can do to help your offices to provide those solutions, work with our community organizations and our students and our children to help drive those examples, we're happy to do that. And we're looking for any help from you guys too to help us inform those. So we really appreciate your time today. We're really hoping for a really collaborative session, and we wish you all the best, and we're really looking for a great 2023. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, yay. Have some more food and coffee.